Greetings, brothers. Welcome to our weekly tactics video. Today we're going to talk about how to get the most points in a game of 40k by using scoring units. We'll dive into some of the units that I like to use for scoring. We'll talk about the stratagems. I'm going to show you a bunch of real-world examples in terms of like deployment and movement to get the most out of these scoring units. So let's jump on in. So thanks for being here and welcome to the video. If we are just meeting, my name is John and every week I'm going to tell you how to be a better 40k player, or at least learn something every week. So let's talk about scoring units and why you should have them in your list. So if you're playing Space Marines in 10th edition, you're going to need to score points. You're going to need to do that in any army. But we're going to look at some of the most common options that people are taking in 10th edition to score points and help winning games. Obviously in a game of 40k, you can actually kill nothing and win the game. So scoring units are super important. If you aren't scoring your secondaries, if you aren't scoring your primaries, you aren't winning the game. So what units are being used for Space Marines for scoring? I think this is the ultimate list. It is scouts, it is infiltrators, it's to a lesser extent assault intercessors with the jump packs or jump intercessors, whatever you want to call them, the new lieutenant with combi weapon, Kidus Assassin, and maybe Outriders. We don't see Outriders get much play, but I think at 80 points they are kind of interesting. So let's go over each of these data sheets, and then we're going to go over secondaries, and then we're going to show you a bunch of deployments and where you should be putting these units and what you need to be thinking about so you don't mess up in the early game and give away easy points. And that's something that I have done multiple times and hopefully I am learning not to do. So let's start with scouts. What is good about scouts? Well, they're amazing at 65 points. That is 5 models with 2 wounds apiece. At the end of your opponent's turn, if this unit is more than 6 inches away from enemy models, you can place it into strategic reserve, which means basically it's going to come back the following turn. It's going to come back 6 inches away from the board edge. This can move them around a lot, gives you lots of options for scoring points, but also just keeps them viable into the late game as well. You never know what secondaries you're going to draw. I think most Space Marine players are running at least 1 squad of scouts. I think 2 is a good number for scouts. They aren't the most durable in that they're just T4 with a 4-up save. They are kind of easier to hide though on those smaller 28mm bases. In Blood Angels, I guess you should give them combat knives and shotguns. Shotguns will let them advance and do actions. Combat knives means that you'll hit with 4 attacks per scout at strength 6, which isn't actually too bad. The chainsword should be taken on the sergeant as well. I really don't rate the sniper rifle or the missile launcher in a Blood Angels list. 65 points though, definitely get some scouts in. They are both infiltrators and a 6-inch move, which means you can infiltrate them aggressively. If you don't feel comfortable after that aggressive infiltration, you can just pull them back 6 inches from the enemy as well, potentially moving them behind an obscuring piece of terrain. It's very strong. Okay. So let's talk next about infiltrators, and I think the Omni Scrambler is super good. So basically, you've got 5 Marines here for 100 points, but no enemy reserve units can be set up within 12 inches of these guys. So if you daisy chain these guys together, there's 5 of them, meaning you can get an 8-inch space between the first and the last guy. If you do that, then if you imagine draw a 12-inch bubble around the 2 guys that are 8 inches apart. In fact, they'll probably be more than 8 inches because you're going to have a space of 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches, and 2 inches, plus model size. So probably the start to the end of the squad can be spread out about 10 inches. So you can basically be screening something in the region of like 34 inches. I think if you take 2 squads of infiltrators, and we see this sometimes, no one's coming in your backfield of your board. There will be no deep strike shenanigans, and this rule overwrites anything that lets them lower the deep strike distance. For example, Necrons with their 3-inch deep strike. For example, Intercessors, Interceptors for Space Marines, or even like the Grey Knights. They have that stratagem that bring them in within 3 inches. So a couple of squads of infiltrators can be very good. 1 squad alone on your backfield objective is still very good. And they can also take, probably what you want to take like the gauntlet on them that gives that whole unit a 6-up feel no pain. So if they do ever get targeted, they're going to be a little bit more resilient. It's not going to change all that much, but it's maybe going to keep them alive a couple of turns longer. So infiltrators are a great unit for holding. They also have the smoke keyword, so you can even be made more difficult to hit, but they're not really a maneuverable unit. They do have infiltrate as well, But I think Infiltrators tend to see much more defensive play as opposed to offensive play. But they will still score points for you, and they will probably still survive into the late game in that they can't really be alpha struck on, and the 6-up Feel No Pain will add some additional survivability. Let's talk next about Assault Intercessors with jump packs. So these guys don't do that much damage in my experience. They do get up to 5 mortal wounds when they charge for 85 points, but what they've got going for them is they've got that 12-inch move, and then, I mean, they do come with a boatload of chainsword attacks, so they will wipe out useless Trixie units, for example, maybe Nurglings. These guys would probably be quite good killing like Nurglings or toughness 3 enemies, but the point of them is that they can move 12 inches. So they move 12 inches, they're not super useful. Like, if you think about scouts and infiltrators, I feel like those units are never killing anything. These guys will actually kill some stuff. You're going to get basically either, or you're going to get 20 attacks at strength 6 -1 in Blood Angels, and then you're going to get 4 Power Fist attacks at strength 10. Bear in mind that's probably going to combo up with a couple of mortal wounds. So you are going to be able to kill a few things. Unfortunately, they do not have any assault weaponry. But if you were playing Gladius, you would have the option to advance and shoot from Devastator Doctrine. So there is plays around that. Possibly these guys are better in Gladius, but they are a good scoring unit in that they're a little bit more durable, they're a little bit faster, so they can jump from cover to cover. Maybe these guys could be more adapt for something like engage on all fronts. But overall, I kind of like them at 85 points. 12-inch move plus advance is going to let them get around a bit. And we do see a few lists running like multiple squads of 5-man assault intercessors with jump packs. Just because they're durable, they do a bit of killing, they can also do a bit of scoring, and you're not spending very many points on them at all. Alright, next up is the very Trixie Lieutenant with combi weapon. We see a lot of people play this guy, and there's various reasons for it. He is a single model on a small-ish 40mm base, meaning that if you ever need to reserve him and bring him in, you can get into tight spaces that other guys can't get into. Once per game, at the start of the battle, you're going to choose an objective on the battlefield until the end of the battle, while one or more models from your army is making an attack against models on that objective. You're going to get to reroll wounds of 1. So that's a cool reason to take him, in that if you know that the middle objective or side objective is getting going to be contested a lot, just being able to reroll wounds of 1 against that for the whole game is going to be very useful. Now, why else is this guy useful? Toughness 4, 4 wounds, 6-inch move. Well, he's got a 5-up Feel No Pain, which gives him a little bit of protection. He's got Infiltrators, so he can deploy in an advanced position if he wants to. He also has Lone Operative, so he can't be shot if he's unless he's within 12 of the enemy. And he's got Stealth, so when he is shot, he's -1 to hit. He also has a very interesting ability called Evade and Survive. So once per turn, if the enemy ends a normal, advance, or fallback within 9, and he is not in engagement range, he can make a normal move. So the second you come within 9 inches of him, he is going to move 6 inches. Now this is possibly the most interesting thing, because comboed with that Lone Operative ability, it makes him very difficult for the enemy to target him. Because they come in close to him to make up a charge, he just moves out of charge range. They come in close to shoot him, he just moves out of shooting range. Remember, you can only shoot him within 12 inches regardless of the range of your weapons. So at 70 points, this guy's a little bit more expensive, but he is going to be able to dot around and do various things. And while he's on the battlefield, he's giving a pretty powerful buff to probably an objective that you know is going to be contested throughout the game. So we see a lot of people running the Lieutenant with combi weapon. You can start him advanced, you can start him defensively, you can start him in reserve, and he is also lone op. So lots to think about with the Lieutenant and combi weapon. Can't be used as your warlord, but I really don't think that matters. I reckon the reason that he can't be used as your warlord is because he's so difficult to get to and kill. They didn't want some sort of shenanigans where players just couldn't get to him / couldn't kill him. So next up is the Kidus Assassin, and she is 90 points, but I think she is kind of awesome. She is on an even smaller base, 32. She has Deep Strike, she has Fight First, she has Infiltrate, and she also has Lone Operative. She also has basically Polymorph. At the end of your opponent's turn, if there's no models within engagement range, you can put her back into the reinforcement step and then bring her down, and she has Deep Strike, meaning you're not limited by strategic reserve. You can come down anywhere as long as you're 9 inches away. Now, the interesting thing with the Kidus Assassin is if you start her on the board on turn 1 and your opponent goes first, right? At the end of their turn 1, you can lift the Kidus Assassin up, because that will be the end of the opponent's turn, and then you can strike her back down. So basically, if you start her in a position, maybe in your deployment zone or maybe forward, the second the opponent finishes their turn, if they're not within engagement range, you can lift her off and you can deep strike her back into the game in turn 1. So that's very cool. Her Reign of Confusion is a good ability as well, because that'll mess with your opponent's CP usage. If there's a stratagem they use a lot and it's a battle tactic, you can make it cost more for the rest of the game. That is very good. She's actually not too bad in fighting either, what with her first fights first, lethal hits, precision, and also precision and anti-infantry 2-up on her D6 shot. It's basically a flamer. She's got a precision 6-shot torrent, which is auto-hitting. She only has a 4-up in Van Save and 4 wounds, and a movement of 7. But again, she's coming down a single model on a small base, not being able to shot within 12. If you do charge her, she's fighting first. And also she's polymorphing in and out of the board. She's a very strong unit. We see a lot of people use the Kidus Assassin. We'll touch on why she is so good later, and also tell you how I played her and made mistakes, so maybe there's some you can avoid. And the last unit I want to talk about today then, before we get into looking at some stratagems and examples, is the Outriders. So Outriders are interesting in that they're 12 wound, I wish they were 12 wound, 12-inch move, but with a turbocharge of 6 inches. That means they are moving 18 inches in turn 1. Or anytime they advance, they're moving 18 inches. They have 3 models, which basically means that they can have 80 points for T5 OC2, toughness 5, 4 wounds. So these guys are, if you compare them, I suppose, to like the 5 assault intercessors you're getting for 85 points, that would be 10 wounds at toughness 4. This is 12 wounds at toughness 5 for 5 less points. They also move further, or more reliably further. When you advance them, obviously, bikes have to go round terrain and infantry can move through. I don't think this is a very killing unit either, with just maybe like 12 chainsword attacks coming out. They do have a couple, basically, what would it be, 6 bolt rifle attacks coming out. The reason people used to love these was because they have big bases and they can block movement lanes, making it more difficult for your opponent to get the movement that they want on the map. And the other interesting thing is just they are OC2 now. So if all 3 of them are on an objective and they survive, they are going to have more OC than an enemy's 5-man. Like if the enemy had scouts on an objective, you could advance your Outriders on and it would be your objective, right? I don't even think scouts can really kill Outriders either, so that could be an interesting thing to do. I think Outriders deserve a chance. I'm going to try and get a 5-man, a 3-man. They don't come in 5s. So I'm going to try and get a 3-man into one of my next army lists and see if I feel like they're any good at T5. We haven't seen them much, and there isn't a way to get them to basically advance and shoot by attaching a character, but I think that gets too expensive. I think the 3-man, in a way, echoes those 5 assault intercessors. Maybe they do a little bit less damage, but maybe they are a little bit more durable. Scoring units possibly want to be doing more durable than doing damage, right? So I guess we'll come back to Outriders as we go through some of these examples. All right, let's move on to the stratagems that's important, that scoring units are good at scoring. But right before you do that, if you've got this far and you're getting any value, please hit the like button or subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. I am here every week trying to make new content for Blood Angels players, and we do have a balanced data slate coming out very soon, so that is exciting, and I, of course, will be covering that. Okay, so some of the secondaries, and there's 6 of them I think that are kind of important that I'm going to talk to you about in terms of scoring units. We've got behind enemy lines. We know what this is. We need to get our units into the opponent's DZ, and ideally we need to be getting 2 units in there. Engage all fronts is another one that is great, that is good to talk about for scoring units. We all know what that is. It is units in board quarters. And cleanse, we need to be cleansing 2 objectives in no man's land for maximum points for cleanse. That can sometimes be a bit difficult, and scoring units are going to help a lot here. The other 3, I suppose, are deploy teleport homers, either the centre of the battlefield or the opponent's DZ. We also have investigate signals, and this is one that you kind of need to keep in mind when you're deploying, and I think a lot of people don't, and I certainly wasn't, so hopefully I can explain how you can guarantee a few extra points when you're playing for investigate signals. And then lastly, extend battle lines. It's kind of a simple one, but if you do draw it turn 1, this is where your scouting / infiltrating units are going to be super valuable, because ideally you'll be able to score it without taking any unit losses. Alright, now what I have is some game examples, and I've put pink hexagons, I hope you can see them okay, with numbers on them, and I think I've got like 5 different examples. So we're going to talk about this. This was a game against Grey Knights. And here's the interesting thing. If we look at hexagon 4 and 5, for example, number 4 would be if you draw that investigate signals in turn 1. You're going to need units within 9 inches, wholly within 9 inches of the corners, to score points in the early game. So, a Kidus Assassin placed in number 5 would be very useful here. Like, she's not going to be able to be shot in turn 1 because she's lone operative. That lieutenant with combi weapon would be very useful. Could be placed in an infiltrating position at turn 5 to basically, if we draw investigate signals, we can scan that corner of the board, get our points. We also need to have something that is wholly within 9 of 4 as well, and that's where scouts with shotguns, potentially, it would be fine to deploy a unit of scouts on there, or a unit of scouts with an advance are going to get there and be able to investigate signals. On this map, position 1 and 2 are also pretty interesting. 1 maybe more so than 2. Because on position 1, we can place a squad of scouts maybe a couple inches from that wall, making it difficult for the opponent to charge if they go first. And this means that if I go first, or difficult to charge after the opponent's gone, I guess, this means that I can hold that objective, which is quite far away from my DZ. Another unit that would be good at maybe trying to get onto that objective could have been those Outriders, could have been those Assault Intercessors, but a squad of scouts can sit there in turn 1, obscured, and potentially hold that. Arguably, the unit on position 2 could kind of do that in the middle of the board as well. Maybe just have one guy tow out. And in this map, could have actually deployed my heavy intercessors just behind this wall near position 2, and what that would have meant would have been that the heavy intercessors could tow out onto that objective, probably be pretty resilient to damage and hold objectives. At position 3 in my deployment, and this one outside my DZ, I have a squad of scouts. Most of the time this is a pretty good place to put the scouts because they cannot be shot. However, playing Grey Knights who are going to deep strike 3 Dread Knights in turn 1, those scouts got annihilated. But in a good normal game, I guess, the scouts on position 3 should be pretty safe here. Moving on to the next battle. And this battle was against Space Wolves and a slightly different DZs. Still 3 and 4. We have to think about having units in the corners to score investigate signals if we draw them turn 1. Now you can see the Kidus Assassin is down here within 9 inches of this corner, and this is a great position for her because, like I said, if the Space Wolf player had gone first, I can instantly pick her up if I feel I need to and deep strike her down in turn 1 somewhere else. She could arrive on position 2. That's actually where I had a squad of scouts that could potentially hold this side full objective from an obscuring position. Position number 1 is also great if I have another unit of infiltrating units, or maybe a unit of assault intercessors behind you that could jump forward and hold this. Basically, anytime you can have these scoring units holding points in obscure positions is good. Bear in mind that the scouts can deploy aggressively, like they could deploy right here against the wall, and if the opponent lines up like this, with Thunderwolf cavalry ready to swing round and make a charge, then the second you make your scout move, you just pull them back 6 inches, and that is precisely what I did here. You can still hold the objective with 1 or 2 scouts, even after pulling back 6 inches. The Kidus Assassin in this game, I actually drew teleport homers in turn 2. and I actually put her back in position 5. And I wanted to talk about this because in a game like this, where, you know, Space Wolf player has 3 units of Thunderwolf cavalry, they're all going to be coming out, they're all going to be pushing forward to these middle objectives, there are going to be space in the backfield. Now, the question about there being space in the backfield is how aggressive do you want to go? Because on this game, I took my Kidus Assassin, put her in position 5, did my 5-point deploy teleport homers, but then she got killed. The Thunderwolves that had here, that had moved out, turned round, moved back, charged her, she died. Whereas I could have put her somewhere in position 1. Now, here a unit of scouts behind this objective here, and a Kidus Assassin is probably pretty resilient against the scouts, right? Because the scouts, even if they charge her, she's fighting first. She's AP 4, 2 damage, with lethals and 5 attacks. So she's probably killing 2 or 3 scouts. I don't think a couple of scouts remaining are really likely to kill her. So I feel like that was a greedy play, right? Like, I saw a hole in the backfield when the unit wasn't fully away from the backfield. Yes, they were outside 12. Yes, my thought process was like he would have to turn around and it would bring a Thunderwolf all the way back into the back corner of the map, which isn't always the worst thing. But I think in this game it would have been much more valuable if the assassin had landed on position 1, she'd held that position, she could also move probably close to the wall to do teleport homers. So I would have held an extra objective, I would have still got my teleport homers, I probably still couldn't have been killed now at this point, so my assassin is alive. So I think that was a bit of learning that I could have taken from playing Space Wolves. And hey, when you don't play armies very often, you make mistakes, and I definitely feel like, I think that was my first game of 10th edition against Space Wolves. Right, so then we move on to a game I played against Eldar, and this was a very interesting map in that a lot of the objectives were out in the open, and this was the one where you had to place the objectives yourself 9 inches from another objective. So in turn 1, I lined up something like this, but I didn't have basically anything back here. So if I drawn investigate signals at the beginning of the game, I possibly would have only scored 2 points, because I think my 10-man death company are hiding in here. You just can't see them because of the camera angle. I also had heavy intercessors hiding in here. You can't see them from the camera angle. So I guess the heavy intercessors were deployed here. Scouts could have been deployed here. That probably wouldn't have been a bad idea. And then later in the game, as these tanks start to roll over, these corner locations, while they don't offer any primary scoring, they definitely offer stuff like behind enemy lines or engage on all fronts. So I guess it's important to just look for obscuring positions that your opponent are not going to be in. And that's what I thought. This is why I've highlighted 6 and 5 here. Like, these are positions my opponent is not going to be in. What are my advantages of putting a unit of scouts here or my Kidus Assassin here? Well, Kidus Assassin here could do deploy teleport homers and behind enemy lines, and or a squad of scouts here. A squad of scouts here could help me with engage on all fronts if I needed this quarter. You could almost mirror the same on the other side of the board as well. And this one position here, there's some firing arcs into position 1, but position 1 could be a location where you might be able to get some units and then be able to tow onto an objective, something like that. Also have this game against Chaos Knights, and Chaos Knights, I wanted to highlight this one because, again, they're going to leave space in the backfield, because Chaos Knights are typically not going to want too many knights sitting in the backfield. But this is a much more difficult game because Chaos Knights are super killy, right? Like, again, I hadn't positioned great. I think this was before I realised how important it was to have a unit within that's potentially wholly within 9 of that corner when you're deploying. Like, my deployment zone in this game is like this. So there's no reason that my heavy intercessors, there's no advantage to them starting on that objective in turn 1. They should be starting where they can make a nice easy move to get wholly within 9 of the corner and or then move on to the objective, right? They should be able to do both things. 3 is an interesting position because I could have a unit of melee units behind this, again, able to tow onto this objective, but the second they tow onto that objective, they're going to be charged by knights, and knights are shot by knights. And knights are very good at killing marines, and this is where the objective under number 2 is interesting as well. You can see the scouts are, maybe I have like OC1 on this objective, and this was a difficult one to know about because scouts are never going to survive against like a knight with a melee claw. But he's going to be able to tow onto this objective on this side and then OC8 onto this objective. So in this case, I might have actually been better having my scouts maybe round here a little bit, like as a juicy target. So he would come round and try and kill the scouts rather than just tow onto the objective. And then my death company could have jumped out and killed him. So I think there was probably a misplay here against this Chaos Knights list. I believe I did win this game. And then there's going to be some spaces in the backfield. But Chaos Knights are an interesting one, because if we look at these units like Scouts, Infiltrators, Jump Intercessors, the Kidus Assassin and or the Outriders, all of them probably get killed in one round of combat, and or they take heavy damage from shooting. So I guess you almost, although these are great scoring units, you really need to also know your enemy and know what you're up against and be prepared to move units around, or be prepared to be overly defensive and cagey. And I guess the advantage of, let's say, the Scouts and the Kidus Assassin is the redeploys every turn. And this is why I'm running those two. Because in a situation like this, where you expect all the Knight player to bring everything forward, when he starts bringing everything forward, that's when I start lifting off my Scout units, lifting off my Assassin, and start looking for the holes that appear behind. Or the weaknesses that can appear behind, right? Like maybe in this game, if I could have, I think this was actually a Redeemer, but like if I'd had my other Vindicator tank here, maybe if I'd both Vindicator tanks here, and made it a purpose to try and shoot down this firing line and hurt these Knights on this side of the board, then coming on in the edge here with the Assassin, with the Scouts to a weaker objective on the side of the board would be a good play. I did think that you could bring down like a Rapid Ingress Death Company or something behind this piece of terrain. Some maps have this back piece of terrain that feels like it really has very little impact in the game, unless you're going to deep strike something into it or behind it and then make a move and a charge. And that's why I numbered this number 5, to sort of say, like, have a look in the backfield, and if there's a bit of terrain that your opponent maybe hasn't really considered what it's for, or I would expect there to be nothing behind it after a couple of turns. Like, he's going to bring something onto this objective, right? There's no reason for a Knight to sit back here. And maybe he has a screening unit like Nurglings, but I don't think this list did have more than the one unit of Nurglings. So I think there's going to be space back here for me to bring something in. And that's why sometimes it might be worth, reserving that Lieutenant if you think there's an opportunity to bring him into a space and score some points. Okay, here's a game against Rukari, and interestingly, it's just 4 objectives. So, number 2 becomes super valuable here for my scoring units, right? Like, I have to use some of my scoring units to get number 2. Number 4 would be a good place for something like Jump Intercessors, right? Because Jump Intercessors are a throwaway unit, 85 points, a scoring unit. The second he's going to have to put something on this objective, it's more likely he's going to do that with the fact that the cover is benefiting him. He's going to put a trash unit on this objective. I'm going to jump out my Jump Intercessors, make a charge, do my mortals, do my boatload of chainsword attacks, hopefully take it away from him, and then I'm going to lose my Jump Intercessors. But that's fine if they do what they do and they prevent him getting 1 turn of primary, or maybe even they score me one turn of primary. That's potentially a decent swing. So on a map like this, again, you need to think about corners. I obviously haven't done it. This was an older game before I really was considering the investigate signals in corners. Again, this is why Kidus Assassin is so good. This is why Scouts are so good, because they can do the corner shenanigans. And this is why I'd probably say 3 scoring units is ideal, because on this map, you maybe want Kidus Assassin in one corner, Scouts in another corner, and then Scouts on position 2. There's not much advantage to holding position 1. The only thing about position 1 is you can use that as a good staging ground. In that, if you had a unit of Death Company aligned in that sort of L formation, they would easily be able to make a charge onto position 2. They'd probably, I think 12 inches from here is probably maybe like 4 or 5 inches from this objective. Potentially, again, maybe slightly longer charge, but potentially they can make a charge from here into there, or they can jump over and kill whatever unit is in this L position for him. So, what are my overall thoughts on scoring units? I've said it a few times. We recommend people try and bring 3. That might seem like overkill, but it builds in some redundancy, right? Because stuff does die. Even if you deploy all your Scouts perfectly, There will be situations where one of these Rukari transports can come right to the edge of the board. They can get line of sight on like one scout, and then it turns out they actually do a bunch of damage. So 3 scoring units seems like the right number. These are the most probable / popular combos that I've been seeing. Couple of scouts and Lieutenant, 3 scouts, 2 scouts in the Kidus Assassin, or 2 scouts and Infiltrators. That's probably the weakest one, because I would expect most of these other lists would have something to hold the backfield as well. Scouts and Infiltrators together are very strong. I just think that maybe, although this is technically 3 scoring units, you're probably going to need a 4th, right? Because those Infiltrators are stuck on your backfield unless something else is there to hold and they can move off. Knowing where to utilize the units and to be being prepared for what is coming is super critical. Using these units in lots of different games against lots of different armies is the only real way to get good with them. I know I still make mistakes on a weekly basis, so get your repetitions in, guys. If there is any questions, comments, whatever, I try and answer as many as I can every week. So give me your suggestions. If there's a scoring unit that I haven't mentioned, please add it to the list, or please leave it down below, and I will think about it and I will consider it, and I'll maybe include it in a future battle report. Thank you ever so much for watching. I know it is a different video again than the normal this week. And I'm treading water until we get the balanced data slate. Hopefully we'll get some big changes for Blood Angels. I don't want to do anything 2 point spaced or 2 point spaced right before they just change everything. I think the balanced data slate is probably out in the next week or 2 now, hopefully. But leave me a comment if you did like the video. Like, subscribe, either join as a channel member here on YouTube or support me on Patreon for literally the price of a cup of coffee, like $3 a month. It means so much to me. It helps me out. And I will catch you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you learned something. By the blood are we made strong. Peace.